I think right now we're in the peak TV era. There's so much content out there, but in a world of so much TV, High Castle really stood out. So maybe Joel and Dan, if you could share a little bit why you thought the show resonated so well in this TV environment.
Well, I think Mark touched on it a lot, telling distinct stories with people with strong voices, and certainly to start with, no one has had a more distinct voice maybe over the last 50 years or so than Philip K. Dick. As far as American writers go, I mean, he has been very prophetic and ahead of his time as far as the kind of stories that we all are gravitating towards. So when you start with something like that, when you start with a great writer and then you have a great team of people, you have a chance to create something singular.
And it's singular for many, many reasons, and not least of which the world it's actually depicting.
Yep.
I think for American audiences, for global audiences, there's always been a fascination with the year of Nazis and Imperial Japan, and the what-if scenario of could they have won? What would have happened if they had won?
And I think the investment, the bet you made paid off. Not only was it successful in this new TV world that we're all in, but it was the most streamed show on Amazon, which is quite the achievement. And I was curious, maybe we'll start with Joel, what was your reaction when you heard that it was actually the most streamed show?
Really pleasantly surprised. I was saying earlier that you work so hard with a group of people in relative insularity. We shoot in Vancouver, and you're collaborating so intensely with people for so long, and you finish something, but it's not really done until it interacts with an audience, and you never really have a sense of who or what that audience is. So, to go out into the world and to hear people respond to what they've seen, to talk to people on the street or to read about what people say, it's always very gratifying for me, not just whether they like it or not, but really to just sort of hear what the dialogue is, what they're thinking about having seen it, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and how, like you were saying, Mark, how it reflects back on your world today. Because, the interesting thing is when the pilot happens and you first have this episode, there's a sense that when you hear the word Nazis or the Imperial Japanese that, okay, we know who the good guys and the bad guys are. So you can sort of hold it at a distance and you sort of let it in because you think, well, I know who the good guys are, I know who the bad guys are. And so you sort of drop in further than you might think you are. And then as it starts to turn a little bit and you become implicated because the person that you thought was a bad guy is doing something that you identify with, or the person that you thought was a good guy suddenly is being called a Nazi, then you find yourself implicated in having complex emotions and reactions to something, and that's sort of when we have you where we want you, because we want that kind of dialogue, we want that kind of thinking. Not that we have an answer, we just want you to be thinking about it because that's what we're thinking about.
I think it's worth pointing out that Dan and our producing team and our production designer, cinematographer, everybody on the show, put so much thought into every nuance and every specific thing that you might see in the show. And I'm even surprised as an executive back in Los Angeles, the thinking that goes into the money and how we came up with denominations for money, or the design for the Vauxhall building that you see in season 2, and where that was drawn from, and how the production team went about that. There's literally nothing in this show that hasn't been completely thought through, and it's a privilege to stand back and watch these guys do that.
I think we're hopefully going to push the envelope even more, and last year was sort of putting people taking people out of their comfort zones and into extreme situations, and I think the way season 2 ends, not to give specific spoilers of that, but you're in a very ruptured version of the world that you've seen thus far, and I think you continue to see fallout from that world.
Totally.
I think one of the things that was most exciting to me about season 2, and hopefully something we'll continue to explore in season 3, is that we put characters together who didn't share screen time in season 1. So Keto develops this strange relationship with Smith, for example, which ends up having a huge payoff at the end of the season for those of you who've seen it. And I think there'll be more opportunities for that as we move forward.
As Keto, as Frank's torturer, in a lot of the research that I've done, certainly in the stuff that's happening today, with interrogation, there is a massive price paid by the interrogator. Mm-hmm. That, and it's something that you learn too, that all of these actions that we do to one another, you know, whether it's the refugee or the person turning away the refugee, we all share the same sort of karmic bank account, and we all sort of are feeling the consequences together. And that's something that, you know, it's something that we both experience when shooting a scene like that, and something that we celebrate. You know, there is something sort of communal and gratifying, for lack of a better word, fun to do those scenes. You know, it's
Sure.
you talk about gratitude and appreciation. We get to sort of try to explore those things, you know.